just talking about it could feel triggering.
When you file for divorce, what you're actually doing is causing narcissistic injury, because their image is now going to be sullied. Their image is going to be destroyed in some way. They have painted a picture of a perfect family.
But here's the important thing. In a divorce proceeding, is that the way a judge is seeing it, as a perpetrator and a victim?
Absolutely not. No,
right.
It's not criminal court.
That's what's so important for people to understand. There's going to be a smear campaign against you. They are going to utilize the children as pawns against you. Welcome back to Flip Your Mindset. I am your host, Stacey Uhrig, and I have once again my guest, Kim Weeks, known as the Narcissistic Abuse Coach on Instagram. Also, you can find her on Instagram as It's Kim Weeks, right?
I am Kimberly Weeks.
We've got Kim Weeks back. This is episode 4 of a series that we've been putting together. And I don't even know that when we started doing this, that we knew this was going to be a series.
No, we didn't. And there's so many layers to this.
So many layers.
Experience that people have. We had to kind of take it apart because there are so many layers.
Yeah. So, let me just give you guys the lowdown. All of this will be in the show notes, so you can easily access it. But episode 1 was really laying the framework of what is narcissistic abuse and how is it different from any other kind of abuse, and what is narcissism and what are the different types of narcissism. And then the second episode was, oh my gosh, so now I've learned I might be, maybe this explains why I've been stuck in this relationship that's felt toxic or what have you. And what do I do? Should I stay or should I go? The third episode was logically, I know what I need to do, but somehow, some way I am frozen in my body, frozen in my mind. I can't take action. So we really focused on that and all the different nuances that hold people up, or anything that becomes an obstacle from the awareness to the acceptance stage of this. We thought we were done at episode 3. Even if you listen to episode 3, we're like, that's a wrap. This was a great series. And when we got off, Kim and I really looked at each other and we said, it just doesn't stop here. And we know that it doesn't stop here because we hold space for it. So we've decided to continue on with the series. And much like episodes 2 and episode 3, where we were very honest about the fact that we were not going to sugarcoat anything, episode 4 is going to be more of that. So this is me up front giving a trigger warning that if you are in a scenario like this and you know that you can clearly see this is a narcissistically abusive situation, psychologically abusive, you're considering leaving, just talking about it could feel triggering, because we're not going to paint a picture of anything other than what we know it is, both based on Kim's own personal experience and just the amount of people I've held space for. I'm very aware of how this next step works. And what we're going to talk about in this next step is actually going through the legal system to dissolve a relationship with somebody that's narcissistic. We recognize that you could be in a relationship with lots of different types of people where it is narcissistic. So it can be with a parent, with a sibling, with a coworker, with a friend, with a boss. Today, we're going to focus specifically on marriage, mainly because we're going to be talking about the family court system. And we're going to be talking about when there's a dissolution of a marriage and the divorce is high conflict, which we talked about in the past episodes, the difference between a divorce and a high conflict divorce. There's no guarantee it will be high conflict if you're divorcing someone who's narcissistic, but there's a very high likelihood that it's going to be high conflict. We wanted to lay the groundwork of what someone can expect, because there's no benefit to somebody that's like, okay, I know I need to get out, for you to understand how it's going to play out. And this is not to discourage you from doing what you know is best for you. But we also, from a compassionate point of view, want you guys to know what you're expecting. So with all that said, Kim, where do you think we should even begin as far as like sharing with people what they can anticipate by going through the court system?
Let's start with the mindset when you begin the process of basically saying no to that narcissistic partner. That's really what we're starting with. When you file for divorce or when you are pushed to file for divorce, okay, or the partner leaves you, it really doesn't matter which place you find yourself. What you're actually doing is causing narcissistic injury because their image is now going to be sullied. Their image is going to be destroyed in some way. They have painted a picture of a perfect family. They've painted a picture of an ideal marriage with you, custom with sometimes a certain kind of look, certain kind of weight, a certain kind of clothing, a certain kind of sometimes plastic surgery, so that you can be their ideal partner and the family system can be their ideal image. It normalizes the narcissist and makes them look like a healthy person. So when the divorce goes down, their image is now being dismantled. That's the word I was looking for. Their image is now being brought into question. And it doesn't matter whether or not you file or they file.
So important. I hold space for a number of people who kind of are in the waiting zone and they're just waiting for their partner to pull the trigger. Mm-hmm. And I always open that question up as to, you have agency. So you don't have to rely on somebody else to make the decision of what's best for you. So what's the value to you in your mind right now to have somebody do that? And often the thought process is, and I think we need to talk about this, just for the purpose of this podcast. Okay, guys, all things are valued, but just for the purpose of this podcast, you'll likely hear me say she, he, because I'm just going to use the experiences that I hold the majority of my space for. And in that case, it's traditionally, I'm holding space for a woman who's going through a divorce with a man, but this can be man and man. This could be woman, woman. This could be they. It's all valuable. But just so I don't trip myself up, I'm setting that stage here. So let's just say, for example, I've got my client in, and she is saying, well, if he asks for the divorce, then I'll know that he wanted it. So it won't be as bad, or they won't abuse me as much. So that tends to be a logical thought process. But let's talk about what the flaw is in that thought process.
It presumes that there's an easy way out. It presumes that there's going to be a way for you to leave the situation with your reputation clean. So if the other person decides to leave and they file, either party can feel kind of like, I didn't want this. This isn't what my desire was, and kind of be in a victim kind of mentality. I'll put it that way. Okay. So typically the narcissist wants that place. They want to be able to walk away saying that they fought so hard for the marriage and that they tried everything that they could and they went to all the counseling possible and they even read books and went to conferences or whatever the situation may be, so that when you file, they can walk away saying, this wasn't my decision. I didn't want this for our children. I didn't want this for our families. This is all on that other person. And so as the person who has been abused, that's actually the truth for you. It's actually the truth that that person has been pushing you and devaluing you and abusing you to get you to leave. So whether or not you decide to file or not, they're going to use that same narrative.
Okay, so I want to make sure people understand what you're hearing, or what hearing what you're saying, which is it's part of the strategy.
Absolutely,
so they can be on the victim side. And guys, everything Kim is saying is accurate, and you can also be in a position where you were going to therapy and they agreed to go, and when you would get there, again, I'm going to use he, she here, he doesn't get out of the car. And the ultimate decision is, it's really not my problem. You're the problem. And so there's nothing I need to do. So there's both sides, right? You can see the person that's like, I'm not the problem. You're the problem. I said I was coming. I'm not going in. very common. So I want to lay that framework. Or I'm going in to also further manipulate the therapist, and I'm going to be putting on that mask, and I'm going to be putting on that charm. And you, as the victim in this situation, knows you're watching it. You know it's all BS, but there's nothing you can do because they're utilizing that charisma and that charm and that kind of secret sauce that they have that is part of their superpower to also manipulate the therapist. So if you are doing that and you haven't gotten to that point yet, and you got to find somebody that understands narcissistic abuse or something known as coercive control, because they'll spot it or they'll be on the lookout. If you go to a therapist that does not have expertise on that, they will be blindsided. They will not know what they're looking at. It's really, really important to understand that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. They actually continue the smear campaign with the therapist.
Right.
They will continue this smear campaign into the divorce process with attorneys, with mediators, with guardian ad litems, with judges.
Right.
They're planting seeds of doubt in other people's minds that you're stable. They're planting seeds of doubt in other people's minds that you have genuine, presence in the relationship. They will call into question this person is after my money. This person is after, turning the children against me. That's called parental alienation. We'll get into that in a little while. But the whole goal of this process is for them to walk away looking like the victim, for them to walk away looking like the person who's been harmed when they have actually caused the harm, and for them to create the environment where the divorce is your fault, and therefore the measures that they're taking to protect themselves, to protect their income, to protect their business, to protect their children is warranted because you're crazy, you're out to get them, you're out to destroy them, and you're out to turn the children against them. This is the strategy of the narcissist using divorce process and the court system when you're talking about parental time against you. And that's their objective.
And I just, again, like we did in the last two episodes, I know that there's two things I feel like are probably going through the listener's head. Either one, holy shit, I don't know what to do. Or two, there's no way that that's going to happen. Like, you don't understand my spouse. Like, he really has no interest in the kids. He really has no interest in me. He's probably going to be really happy that this is happening. And all of that actually might be true, but what you will see in court will not be representative of that. And part of that is to also make you feel unstable, because the more unstable you feel, the more destabilized you will be in court and the more power they get. So, one of the things that comes to me often is different high conflict divorce coaches will come to me and ask if I can hold space for the destabilization piece, right? While they're working on the logistic piece, there is a campaign to make the person feel as crazy as possible and to feel as much of a shell of themselves as possible, knowing that that could influence how they show up in court and that will influence the judge's decision. And so it's very strategic. And so going through a system like this, having a support system like Kim or myself or someone else that specializes in this is key, because you're going to be questioning yourself, because the things that you see and hear are going to be disturbing because they're going to be shocking, because they're going to be lies, number one. And I think the other thing that I see often is the deep grief of how did we get here? I'm just thinking of a client I was working with, and they were married for 30 years. And there was this concept of when they first separated, because remember, they're trying to get you to do whatever it is that they want you to do. So they know what's important to you.
That's right.
And very often family and the children are that important pawn piece. Okay. And it is a game. That's why I said the word pawn. So I'll see things like the spouse saying to the person that's my client, we're going to do this the best. We're going to do this the right way. We're going to do this we're going to still be friends. We're going to be good co-parents. We're going to do all these things because they need that hook. They know they can no longer love bomb. That option's gone. So they have to find the other hook. So they go into this scenario thinking we're going to be collaborative and this is going to be okay. And then they do everything in the exact opposite of that scenario, and they go for the jugular. And so again, they're kind of caught off guard, and then they're really hurt because they really bought into this idea that we can do it different. We can be special. We were together for a long time. We both love our kids. We can do this. And then the whole thing blows up while you're trying to go through this proceeding. Do you see that often, Kim?
Absolutely. And on top of that, they go for the jugular with you while at the same time painting themselves as a perfect parent. All the things that you've been trying to get them to do while you were married to them. All of the initiatives to participate in the school and participate with parent-teacher conferences and take them to their doctor's appointments and be, present during family events. They will now do that, post it on social media so that it is seen, or send photos and pictures and videos to their family to present the ideal image of them as a parent while you're going through the divorce process. Meanwhile, you've been through 30, 20, 10, 5 years of begging this person to be a part of taking care of their children, and they refused. But somehow during the divorce process, they know exactly what to do to paint the picture of them being that ideal parent. And it's very disconcerting for children because they have been wanting that attention from that other parent. And then all of a sudden they start to get it and they crave it. They're thirsty for that attention. So they take it in thinking, oh, well, maybe this is just mom and dad that they were having all these problems and now they're going to get divorced. And so now I'm going to be able to really have this relationship with the other parent. They're being paraded in front of people, their family, their church community, their, civic organization, all that. They're being painted as or paraded in front of all those people. And then once the divorce is finalized, they go right back to that same behavior. They drop the child or children and they start narcissistically abusing them because they have them one-on-one.
Right.
That's typically the process that happens. So that's very disorienting for that person that's taking them to court for the divorce process, because they pull you in to say, we're going to be friends. We're going to do this the right way. Then when you get in mediation, they do you completely dirty and say all kinds of things about who you are and you're crazy and your mental health and all the rest of that stuff, while at the same time presenting a perfect image to everyone in your sphere of influence, your family system, and you're destabilized. They look like a hero and like they're the responsible person trying to go amicably through the divorce process. Yeah. And so you have all of this kind of complete distortion going on, and it's crazy making. That's the term that's typically
it is used. Crazy making. I'm thinking cognitive dissonance, like you're just constantly questioning yourself, but that's the end game. So, Okay, so we're talking right now about what the individual person is going to do, but let's talk about what happens when they get in. So 2 things come to mind. Number 1, in a non-high conflict divorce, it could be possible to go through a mediator.
Yes.
Right. And to mediate this out. And so if you don't know that the person's narcissistic, or maybe you suspect that they're somewhere on that spectrum, but you don't know that there are different kinds of divorce and there's something known as high conflict, you might also attempt to go down that mediation route because it tends to be the most cost effective. What is your thought on this? Because I have a lot of thoughts on mediation in these high conflict divorces.
So depending on where you live and where, in the United States, for those who are United States listeners, there are some states that require mediation. I live in a state that requires mediation. And so those are opportunities for that narcissistic partner to ingratiate the mediator to them. They go on a kind of smear campaign of their own with the mediator to paint you as a person that has done harm to them, that's trying to, drain the bank accounts, even though they're the ones training the bank accounts, as trying to turn the children and parentally alienate you. They go through this whole process, and that mediator is reporting back to the court. They're writing notes. They're reporting to the judges. They're, communicating with attorneys. So they can become a type of puppet for that narcissist, depending on how well they act. And I say act for those who are listening by audio in quotation marks, because it is a performance, just like you are an actor in a movie. So depending on what happens in that mediation, they can win the mediator over to their side and make the process of settlement for the things that you want to walk away from with the divorce process a lot more difficult. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What can also happen, depending on how you show up, and I say it that way, if you're composed during mediation, that's actually going to cause that narcissistic partner to be extremely angry, because they are poking you, provoking you to get a reaction. So if you don't give it to them, they could lose it in front of the mediator, and then all bets are off for them, which can happen.
It's so funny because you're making me think, if anybody's ever familiar with the kind of behind the scenes at Disney, when you're a character and you're working for Disney, every gate, every door you enter into the park, there's a deep yellow line. And the idea is when you cross the yellow line into the park, you are the character and you are not to break character whatsoever. So I had a client once who was easily poked. Right? She was easily provoked. He actually knew the buttons. He always pushed the buttons. And she knew that she could be highly emotional and reactive. And she knew that that would not work in her favor in this mediation. So what we worked on was this idea of the character she's going to go in as, which is part of her, but it was this composed piece. And that as soon as she crossed this yellow line going into the court or go in courthouse, right, where the mediation might be, that she just has to be able to navigate with her other parts and be like, you need to let this part come forward. So she could be as composed as possible, because they will try to do whatever they can in order to get you to erupt so they can use that narrative against you. But to Kim's point, if you can stay strong, they will likely be the ones to implode. And it's unfortunate, but if you're not a game player, you're going to have to learn how to play the game.
It's the
absolutely no way you can go in saying, I don't do tactics. Because here's the thing, you're already in the game. You're already in a sword fight. And so if you do not come in prepared, it's going to be to your detriment. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. It's chess, and you're playing a long game here. And the reality is that your composure has to be rooted in the truth of who you were in that relationship. Your composure can be rooted in, the fact that you were not abusing that other partner, that you married that person because you love them and that you wanted a life with them, that you had these children and you've been raising them because you love them and you want a life with them that's as whole as you possibly can make it. And so a big part, because I went through mediation, I went through several rounds of mediation, is rooting yourself in the truth of that for yourself, not for that other partner's validation, really not even for the mediator's validation, because you don't have any control over what happens when you get in there. All you can do is hold on to the truth for yourself and let that be a part of that stepping over the yellow line and putting on, this is who I am. I'm playing this role in this container of a space for the purpose of this mediation, but this is who I really am. Yeah. Now, you can't go in, and I'm going to say it this way, and we said it in a previous session. You have to abandon all sincere communication as it relates to that other person, meaning you can't go in saying that person's a narcissist. You can't go in calling those kinds of names and all of that, because that's going to set something off to the court that indicates that you're not there for good interests. What you can do is communicate what your experiences have been, what behaviors you've witnessed, what things you have been said to you. You're in a legal situation, so you're talking facts and events.
Right. And I think that that's so important, because terms like gaslighting, narcissist, narcissistic abuse, love bombing, smear campaigns, flying monkeys, they're not going to be received well. That's not because, again, it's subjective. And and that's not to say it's not happening, but the courts don't care. The courts only want hard, cold facts, and utilizing language that is your interpretation of what something is not something that the court is interested in, and could be used not against you, but is going to be taken into consideration. So it's just so important when you go into those situations that we stay, what I say, neutral.
Neutral. That's right. Yes.
Right. So anybody who is in the room with you and the offender would see the same thing. There would be no interpretation. In this time, he did not talk to me. We're not going to use the word discard. Okay. Right. Because we just need to know he did not talk to me at that moment, and every single person there would know. Or he left the house and didn't come back for 6 months, but now he wants full custody. He left the house and didn't come back for 6 months. Anybody that could see it would know that that's accurate. Any interpretation or any language used to enhance or to explain what that is from a lexicon, it's not a good idea.
That's right.
And again, if you're going through a situation like this, I do always recommend a high conflict divorce coach, because that's what they're going to logistically coach you on. That's not what necessarily we would coach someone in. We're really coaching in holding the space for the real feelings and the big feelings, and being able to get it out and processed, so you can go into these situations not carrying that with you. Let us hold that.
Correct. Yes.
It's like
and
you're validating it. Big backpack. Just give us the big baggage. Just we'll hold it. We've got your back. You're going to go in. You're going to be great. We believe you. They need one person to believe them.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. We believe you. We know it's bad, but we also know this is the way it's going to look, and that's okay. You don't need to prove anything when you're in there. Just get focused.
Yes. And they only need one person to say everything that you're saying is valid. It makes sense. It's real.
Right.
You're not making this up. This is an actual thing. I can't tell you how many clients go, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is an actual thing. Like I didn't have language for it. I didn't know how to explain it to anybody. I would sound discombobulated when I was trying to explain it. But when I say, no, this is an actual process that people take people through to abuse them. These are actual experiences that you're having, and they're textbook, and it happens every time someone is being narcissistically abused. Yeah. Then that sense that when they go into mediation or they're talking to their attorney, that they have to prove that, and I put that in quotations, they don't have that like urgency for someone to believe them, because they have someone to do that. And that's teaching them what their experience, like what it means and what was actually happening, giving them the appropriate terms. And that's the place to be able to have that conversation, not in a legal standpoint or in a court environment at all.
Yeah, they don't want the emotions.
They don't.
We can hold the space for the emotions, but let's really get into, we've now gone into a courtroom, right? How well informed is a family courtroom or a family court judge on narcissistic abuse, on coercive control, which we should talk about what that is, and doesn't matter to them in this divorce proceeding?
That's a loaded question. And I say that because there are some judges that are more connected to what narcissistic abuse is, what coercive control is than others. And whether they're connected to it or not, if there's no law, case law that they can use to take that into consideration, it won't matter. And it depends on the state that you're in. Some states, with the divorce process, it's no fault. So it's literally we're dividing assets and we're dividing child time. That's it. They don't, if there's a assault or there's physical evidence of physical violence, even some evidences of, verbal abuse, that might be taken into consideration. But for the most part, it's a case that they're not trying to get justice for. They're not there to determine whether or not who's right, who's wrong, who was a bad partner, who was not a bad. They're not there for any of that. What they're there for is to divide assets and parenting time. So often, and I think I said this on one of our previous messages, often we go in thinking it's the law, it's the court, it's the law. We're there to get justice.
Yeah. And I love this when you taught a course I took on intention and impact. Yes. And we talked about rupture and repair. And I'll just never forget, you had this laid out. There was like a justice, you have to remind me what it was, but there was like a section that was about like justice. And then there were two other sections, and each one kind of had its own intent and impact.
Right. The justice approach is there is a perpetrator and a villain and a victim. And the court process is to go through the process of determining how do we hold that perpetrator responsible and how do we support the victim in being given back whatever they lost in the process.
But here's the important thing. In a divorce proceeding, is that the way a judge is seeing it, as a perpetrator and a victim?
Absolutely not. No, right. It's not criminal court.
That's what's so important for people to understand. When they are going to go through this and they think to themselves, I'm finally going to get justice, you're in the wrong mindset.
That's right.
Because that's not the court system that you're going through. What you're going to be going through is a divorce proceeding. Just like Kim said, it's division of assets. And if you have children, visitation, custody. That's it. And they're not interested in someone being a perpetrator and a victim. And so often we go into these situations, or we see our clients go into these situations thinking they're finally going to get justice. There's big money on the table. He was abusive, so I'm going to really go after the jugular. That's not the place for it, unless you can take them to criminal court and actually prosecute them with a crime.
Correct.
That's not going to be the space. And I think the biggest problem is, this is why I see some of these. I mean, I have two clients I can think of right now where the divorce proceedings was high conflict 5 years, both of them. And guys, when we're talking 5 years, we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is another thing we're going to talk about, right? Which is using the court as a financial abuse arm. Yes. But the reason it gets so sticky is because there's so much ego at play, and there's so much anger at play, and there's so much retribution at play, that you want what you rightfully deserve. But what you rightfully deserve is based on what you know was happening behind closed doors. The court doesn't care. They're just there to dissolve your stuff.
It's like a civil matter. It's not a criminal matter. And because of that, and I think one of the things that makes this process especially difficult is there has been harm. There has been sometimes criminal harm. It just can't be proven. And therefore, it makes it very difficult to dislodge yourself or detach yourself from the experience you had in the marriage and the experience of what you're there to do with family court. And that's sometimes one of the biggest things that we hold space for, the grief that in order to get that, the term, and the biblical term is recompense, or the payback from the situation, you're not going to get it from family court. There's no way for them to deliver it, because that's not the way that court system is set up.
Right.
And so what's difficult is that even though that's the case, there are tools and strategies that the abusive person can use to continue harm to you, even in the court proceeding.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, there are several things that are going to happen during the divorce proceedings, and a lot of it, if you have children, revolves around those children. Because if you've been abused in the marriage, typically those children have had some kind of impact to that, whether it's just vicarious, we call it vicarious trauma, or secondary trauma of witnessing it, or they've actually been abused verbally, psychologically, sometimes physically, sometimes sexually themselves. Okay. And so because of that, your attempt to let the court know that those are the things that are happening or have happened with your children can actually be a disservice to you if you do not have proof. And this is a hard truth to swallow, because there is a term called parental alienation. Parental alienation, or grandparental and alienation for grandparents, is when one parent tries to turn the children against the other parent and therefore alienate them from their relationship with their kids. And court systems do not support parental alienation in any way, shape, or form, even to the degree that there is a high threshold for proving that the other parent is abusive and that the attempt to not have them near that other parent is warranted. It is a very high standard of proof. And again, some of these are criminal acts. So if those things have not been documented, if police have not been called, if there's not a case that's pending, if you haven't had, CPS get involved, and all of those things, then it's her word against his or his word against hers. And the court looks at that often as an attempt at parental alienation, which can backfire.
It can backfire. And I think there's another arm to this that I've seen, where the children are old enough to recognize that they do not feel safe around this other parent. Right. So let's just say, for argument's sake, there's a few children in the relationship, or just one child really, and they're with the parent that's on the receiving end. They spend the most of their time with the parent that's on the receiving end of this abuse, and they see it. And they also maybe are either receiving it themselves, or again, secondarily witnessing it. But there's a lack of safety and security with the offending parent. And let's just say they're in high school or in middle school, and they're saying, I don't want to go. This person doesn't leave me feeling safe. I'm not comfortable. I feel horrible about myself when I'm there. I don't want to go, which, we get into this sticky position, because part of it is, well, I understand why you don't want to go, but by court law, you're supposed to go. And if I don't make you go, they could claim parent alienation. So even if you know it's not safe and your child knows it's not safe,
yes,
what can happen often is the offending parent will then file a claim of parental alienation. And I've seen it happen before, where children have literally dug their heels in and said, I'm not going. And the next thing you know, the parent on the, receiving end is getting court documents saying that you're further being sued now for parental alienation.
Correct.
Which is a gawk and a scat and oh my gosh, I can't believe it. But that is the playbook. And so this is where they're using the court system to abuse, because honestly, the reality is typically that offending parent doesn't even want to spend time with the kid.
No, they just want power. They want control.
Want power and the control.
Yeah. They want power and control, and they want to be able to create as much distress in the other parent as possible. They also they see that other parent and their children as an extension of themselves. They don't see them as differentiated. They don't see them as their own people.
Let's roll with that, because I think, I could let that slide so easily because I understand what you're saying, but I'm very aware that we need to really address that. So let's go into the weeds on that one.
Okay. So a narcissist sees human beings as property. as tools for their use. They do not see human beings as human. They don't. And therefore, when they have married someone and they've had children with someone, they see that spouse and those children as their tools for use. They see them as their property that they get to control and they get to dominate. And as a result of that, when a child, it's interesting that you brought up teenagers and middle schoolers, because that's typically when there is a lot of pushback.
Yeah.
When children begin to develop their own sense of themselves, they start ideating and being an individual, and they start having their own schedules, their own friends, their own parties to go to, their own, stuff that is more important. That narcissistic parent doesn't care anything about any of that. They want that child to be of use to them for the purpose of creating the image of them being the ideal parent. And so when that child begins to start wanting to go do things on their own, according to their own schedule, then all bets are off. That literally puts that child in the same position as you have been if you are going through the process and you were abused by that narcissist, to say no to them. And they don't take that kindly at all. They don't see children and their spouse as different than them. They see them as an extension of them. They see them as a part of their, just like you have a car that you drive or you have a cell phone that you use that's how they see their partner and their kids.
I always say it's transactional.
Very transactional.
Right? So there's a means to an end. You are to show up so they can look like a good parent or as the victim or whatever it is.
Right.
And unfortunately, at the end of the day, children want recognition, love, connection with their parents. So they become easily manipulated, and you can start to see it, right? When you start to see your kid go with your spouse for a weekend and come back, and some of the language they're using towards you is a little different. Some of the eye gaze is a little bit different. And you're starting to recognize, I've seen this before, but not from this person. And it can be a very, very difficult balance, because again, the child is trying to be connected in whatever way that they can with either parent, because that's just natural attachment 101. We just want to be seen, heard, valued, understood, significant. Correct. So if I show up this way, will you be happy with me? Right. And the reality is the kid doesn't understand it's transactional. They're in survival mode for attachment and seeking affection. And so it becomes very, very hard on the person that's on the receiving end, because it's often not just the spouse that they're going into battle with. Now they might find themselves internally in a battle with their own child too. And then there's a grief and a massive amount of fear.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And it's actually another tactic of post-separation abuse called counter-parenting.
Yeah.
So if that abusive partner knows that there are standards that you have as a parent for your kids, there are things that you want them to do, you don't want them to do. There are boundaries that you're setting for them. That other parent, to be the cool parent, will then support the child in doing things that they know you don't want them to do. And it's counter to your parenting. They're actually teaching the child the same disrespect and devaluation they have given to you. They're raising them to see you as someone. And even, I've had my children, someone said to them, you don't have to listen to anything she tells you. She doesn't know anything she's talking about. You don't have to do anything she tells you to do. That's counter parenting. When a parent teaches the child that the other parent is not smart, doesn't have any common sense, isn't to be listened to or followed, you're actually counter parenting. And it's a tactic to create, because typically the counter parenting are things the kids want to do anyway. They want to go to a particular movie, go to a concert. They want to go on a particular vacation. They want to go on a cruise. They want to create a bond with that kid, that they're doing something they want to do that the other parent doesn't want them to do.
And I think, this is a little bit of a side note from the court piece, but I think what's really important is to understand that in that moment, because everything feels like it's out of control, there comes to a time where a client might come to me and say, I can't, ... I can't let them go with their dad because this is what would happen. And I can't control what's happening when he's with the dad, or I can't control the fact that the father's going to let them eat red dye number 5. Like, I know my child can't have red dye number 5 because they go off the walls, but he's going to purposefully jack them up with Skittles and whatever. And at some point, it's that hard conversation of we have to really focus on where we're going to put our energy.
That's right.
Because the more energy you put towards trying to control it, and your ex-spouse or your soon-to-be ex-spouse senses it, they're going to go even more further on the extreme.
That's correct.
And you're going to continue to chase that dragon, and they're only doing it to get the rise out of you. That's the fuel.
Yeah,
right?
They're trying to get supply.
We're trying to get supply. This is what we've talked about in all the other sessions. There's a fuel and supply need, and they're going to be picking and trying to find it. And so this is a little bit about relinquishing control in a situation that feels so out of control, of knowing that they're going to discredit you. There's going to be a smear campaign against you. They are going to utilize the children as pawns against you. And the instinctive fear-based survival mode sense is, I have to control all of that outcome. Because if I don't, the way end of that is I'm going to end up being completely alone. And that's not necessarily the case, but they want you to believe that that's the case.
Yeah. And this is actually, it is a part of the family court system.
So let's talk about that.
Because when they're taking them to do all of this fun stuff, if you object and say, this isn't something that I approve of, then you actually look like the controlling parent.
Right.
And they will position it to say that you're trying to keep the kids from enjoying time with their other parent. It could be something that in the marriage you sat down, you all agreed to, we're not going to allow the kids to do X, Y, or Z. But in the divorce process and after, this becomes something that other parent counterparents with you on. If you step up to say something about it, then you actually look like the person who's doing harm to the children. Because who wouldn't want their kids to go on a cruise in the Caribbean? Who wouldn't want their kids to be able to go to an island? Right. And there's so many little nuances in the court system that they don't get involved in. Things like nude beaches, and they don't get involved in any of that stuff.
Or every single trip was with a different girlfriend. And this is the one I really need them to meet. Like, we can't try to control every little nuance. This is a huge exercise in surrender. And I'm not asking people to surrender to abuse or surrender to egregious behavior. It's surrendering to the fact that you cannot control every single outcome. And the more you do, the more it will be used against you, and the cycle will persist. It's correct. Like holding on harder is going to make it worse. If you loosen your grip a little bit, they get bored. They'll just go get the supply. I actually have a little sign behind me. After working in this space for so long, I just kept saying the same thing over and over. So I made it into a little plaque in my office. And then my clients who are in this space get a screensaver for their phone of this image. And it says, know your truth and trust your knowing. And the reason why is because all that matters is that you know your truth. We don't have to prove it to the judge. We don't have to prove it to your ex-husband. We don't have to prove it to anybody. The internal power of you knowing your truth and you specifically trusting your knowing. It's the trusting your knowing that's the hardest part, because they've created a space that has created so much self-doubt for yourself. That knowing your truth and trusting yourself is the biggest agency you can have.
That's right.
I know that this is not safe. I know this is not copacetic. I know he's using the judge against me. I know these things and I trust my knowing. Now there's a grief that comes with that. And there's a huge discomfort with not being able to right the situation. But sometimes that's not the place for it.
Correct. Yeah. And I think one of the hard, and we're gonna keep it 100.
Yeah.
One of the hard truths is that narcissistic partner is going to continue to be who they are. And while you were married, there were a lot of things that you were able to protect your children from because you were present. But once the divorce is final and they have separate parenting time with them, the reality is they're going to have to get to know that other parent for themselves. There will be experiences they have where they are on the receiving end of the same treatment that you have experienced. And there are certain things that the court will step in with, and there are certain things the court will not step in. This is the hard truth.
Right.
So what I have always said is I trust God when my children are away from me. I trust him to let me know what I need to know, when I need to know it, and then give me direction on what to do with it. Okay. Because the reality is they're going to exercise their controlling nature and their dominant nature. And for some people, that means your children are going to have physical harm or other forms of harm. And those are actually the instances where you can step in with the court system in criminal court. You can also go back to the family court system to try to change parenting time. But the reality is, until that happens, there is a releasing that we have to do of that control and a trusting that our children are going to be okay, even though they may experience something. And this is probably one of the things that the women that come to me have the most difficult time accepting, that they know that other person is not safe, like you're saying, trusting your knowing. And they know that their kids are going to experience things away from them and they can't do anything about it.
Right. I'll say the only thing they can do is be honest with the child and try to create a sense of agency within the child, depending on how old the child is, in order for them to not lose themselves, the child.
That's
right?
Correct. Yes.
That's the only thing that you can do, which is not a small feat.
Not at all. And teach them. This is where we get to do what perhaps some of us did not get from our own parents, is being taught things like what boundaries are.
That's right.
What's appropriate touch? What are things they shouldn't be witness to? What are situations that are, how do they handle it in their bodies if something happens and they feel unsafe? What do they do with that? We can teach them to trust their intuition, to trust their instincts, to give them access to tools if they're feeling unsafe in the other parents. Because one of the things that happens, and we didn't talk about driving, but parents people who are narcissistic love to get in the car and drive really fast and out of control and bob and weave and out of traffic and do so in a very dangerous manner. And children are in the middle of that sometimes. What do you do when you're in a situation where you can't get out of it? It feels dangerous to try to soothe or calm yourself. Those are things we can teach our kids, Yeah.
Kim, having gone through this and being on the other side, above and beyond holding space for people who go through this, what are, say, one or two or three things that you wish you knew when you went through the process that you know now?
I would say the first thing is that there isn't going to be a winner in the divorce process.
Yeah.
You're not there to win. Win meaning get everything that you want and ask for and get everything perfectly exactly how you want it, have everything in the order, written out the way that you want it. When I say win, that's what I mean. You can win from the standpoint of being free from that abusive person and trying to advocate for you having as much time with your children as possible. But winning, like I got the house and I got the this and I got all the things and the person walked away with nothing. That's not the objective of the divorce process at all, especially if they've done harm to you and you feel like they deserve to walk away with nothing. Okay. So I guess the thing I'll say is for you to really sit down going back to your term about surrender, and define your win.
Mm-hmm.
What would be a win for me? Not a traditional court case of a divorce win, but what would be a win for me? Is it me walking away and not having to interact with this person? Is it me, having time with, 80, 90% of the time my kids are with me?
Right.
Is it making sure that medical and extracurricular is a part of, and I had final decision making on,
right,
their faith and religion, their schooling and education, and their extracurricular activity? Is my final decision making the win? Because I'm going to make decisions based on what I believe is best for them, and it's going to include what they want to, and taking them into consideration, and not just forcing them to do things because I want them to do them. What is going to be a win for you versus what people teach you or you hear about a traditional win is in the divorce process?
Right. Because money and assets,
and the person having, the schedule based on what you want. That's traditionally what people say you want in the divorce process. With a narcissist, the win is going to be for you to have as much freedom and your children to have as much time with you as possible.
Mm-hmm.
That was the win for me. And that meant that there were some asset things I had to stop trying to fight for in the process.
Yeah.
When people are draining bank accounts so that you don't have anything to split 50-50 at the end, you can try and fight and get the judge to say, here's what you started with when you filed, but now that person spent all the money, so there's really nothing you can fight for that. But those are the things that are going to keep you hooked in that divorce process.
No doubt. No doubt. And here's the other thing that I think is really important to understand. And you talked about being 100. This is 100.
Mm-hmm.
You can come up with a divorce decree. It can be signed. Everything can be laid out about how much money you're going to get for your kids, how much spousal support you're going to get, what kind of assets you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
They don't play by the rules. So even if you fought for 5 years,
yes,
to get X on the paper,
yes,
the likelihood that they do not follow the decree is so high.
Yes.
They know they have drained you financially trying to go through this process. And they know that you likely either are too burnt out, too exhausted, or don't have the money to take them back to court.
Correct.
And I hate saying that, but I just have seen it so often. And when I see a client go from, I can share whatever I want, they can choose to listen or not. So maybe they're not listening, and saying, well, I'm still going to fight. I'm still going to fight. I'm still going to fight. And then somewhere we cross the line and they accept, you know what, even if I get everything I wanted in this, he's not going to actually follow through.
Yes.
Once we get over that line and they've accepted that, and now they're looking for something like you just talked about, which is decision-making, controls, right? Which there's no price point on that, guys. That is the most invaluable piece, because the more you have to negotiate with a parent that is seeking to make your life difficult on little decisions, like can so-and-so go on the school trip or join this team or do whatever, not having to negotiate that. It's hard to get that kind of custody, but once you can not have to negotiate that, there's no price point on that. It's the most valuable thing you can get. But at the end of the day, there needs to be an understanding that even if you go through the whole process and you get everything you think is the win on paper, or you get anything on paper, Kim, what do you think the likelihood is that this person's actually going to follow through?
They are not going to follow through with everything that you sign for in the divorce.
Even if it's a legal document, and they could be contempt of court and they could go to jail. It can only happen if you take them back to court.
If you take them back to court, if you spend more money, and typically when you do that, there is I'm going to call it a grace, where the court says you're supposed to pay this, so pay it. So it's not like, gotcha, they didn't pay that, and now they are going to be, held in some kind of arrested, or it's nothing like that. It's just delaying what they have to do as long as it is. And in the middle of that, you still have to pay for those things. You still have to take care of your kids. And now you're paying to, for more fees. This is another part of that post-separation abuse. It's legal abuse and financial abuse. It's a way for them to continue to drain your energy, your time, and your money. Because at the end of the day, if you take them back to court and they're held in contempt, then they just are told to pay. They're told to do what they were supposed to do in the first place. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a penalty. And in the middle of all of that, there's a delay of all that needs to be paid for your children. And somebody's going to have to pay it. And it's going to have to be you.
Yeah. I mean, I see this. I see it with everything and anything: doctor's bills, private schools, not private schools, sports things, just regular old child support to put food on the table and get clothes on their back. We've kind of thrown around the concept of post-separation abuse and post-divorce abuse, but it's just so important for people to understand those are real terms that have real implications. And especially as soon as the divorce is over, that injury, the narcissistic injury, is so huge, they're going to go for that jugular. And I'll just never forget, I had a client, she finished out this 5-year situation. There was no real sense of relief because if anything, she was just so beyond fatigued. Mm-hmm. And then literally the first payment was like 3 weeks late.
Yeah.
And she was so angry. And I just said to her, I'm so sorry. You're just going to have to buckle up. Yeah. Like, this is the way. He's already saying to you, I can't dangle this in front of you anymore, in front of the judge. I'll just do whatever. And the worst thing you can do is give him the rise.
That's right.
Because that's exactly what they're seeking. And it's kind of sadistic. It's almost a shock to the client. They're like, really? Like, do they even have the energy for it? I'm like, they've got the energy for it all day.
They want to see you in distress. It's the same playbook from when they were in the relationship with you. Now they don't have immediate access, meaning physical proximity, in the same way. So they have to figure out new tactics to cause that distress. And if it's a delayed child support payment, or if it's, no, I'm not going to pay for this field trip, and it's $1,000 field trip for your kid, or if it's, no, I'm not going to support him being on that team, I want him to play this sport or her to play this sport, they will use all of those little things to continue poking at you.
This one was my favorite, and this one's pretty typical. And I'm going to preface this by saying, if you have an opportunity in your proceedings to get as much upfront as possible, even though it might be a lesser amount in the long run, do it. And there's 2 reasons why. Number 1, the money's done. And number 2, it's just one more thing they can't control. It creates that ability to be more low contact, if possible, because this has been, I'm not going to say my favorite because none of this is my favorite, but I'm just saying this is like the one that I'm like, yep, there it is, where there's an 80-20 split, right? So like, you're going to get X amount of child support. And then on these extraneous things, we're going to do an 80-20 split. So on the camps or on the field trips or on the sports or anything like that. So now I'm just going to use again, mom, dad, he, she. So now mom's keeping a spreadsheet of all the expenses and say there's multiple kids. Let's just say there's 3 or 4 kids in the mix. Okay. Or even if it's 2, now we're keeping, it's orthodontics. It's, football helmet, new cleats, pads, lacrosse stick, whatever it is, chink, 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 chink. And then you send it and you're like, I've paid my 20%. Now I'm expecting you to reimburse me my 80%. And now dad goes, well, I'm willing to pay for the helmet for A, but not for the helmet for B. I'm willing to pay for the cleats for C, but not for A and B. And now it's just a pissing match.
That's right. Yes.
And I've seen it so often, and there's no rhyme or reason. Well, I just don't think so-and-so needs the helmet, or I don't think so-and-so needs the cleats. And now all of a sudden we're back to them kind to control the narrative of what they think is important. They don't really care. They're just trying to upset you.
Yeah. And there's nothing you can do then other than go back to court, which you're going to spend more money to go back to court.
So the best thing you can do is just start to wrap your brain around if you're going to have a spouse that does this. Now, some spouses won't because they want to be seen as the big man on campus.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not going to be everyone, but I have seen this a lot. And in a situation like that, there just has to be a level of acceptance of, if I had to pay for this completely on my own, what can I afford?
That's right.
And that's the mindset that needs to go in. And if you get the money that is legally designated to come back to you,
yes,
that's gravy. It's not expectation. And I hate saying that.
I know.
But that's the truth.
It is absolutely the truth. And I think that the way that I have reconciled it in my own heart is I believe that God put me in the position to be a mother to my children. And as a result of that, there are going to be some things that I do that other person may or may not participate with. There are things the court will not mandate. When you have kids who start driving, the courts are not going to mandate you pay for something that's not a need. Car insurance, cars, prom, those aren't things the court can mandate because they're not needs. So if I'm going to be taking care of those things, then I'm going to do that because I have been blessed to have these children, and I'm going to take care of them to the best of my ability. I'm going to ask that other parent to do their part, but if they don't do their part, then I'm going to take this is my seed that I'm sowing into the ground of their life so that they have the childhood that they've wanted to have. And that's best for them. And I'm doing what I'm supposed to do as a parent. That's the way that I have reconciled those moments where there is something that really is both parents' responsibility to take part in, but the other person won't do it. I'm just going to have to take it. I'm going to have to eat it and see it as I'm planting a seed into their life for their best interest.
Amen. All right, guys, I could go on and on and on forever and ever, but I have to bolt. Kim, this has been incredible. I do believe we're going to come back for another episode. I'm not going to launch what that episode's going to be yet because I want to sit in the background with Kim and discuss what we think this could be. Okay. But I'm really hoping that everybody could just walk away from today's episode. I understand it's triggering. I understand it's going to be alarming. It's going to cause pause. Mm-hmm. But again, our goal is not to sugarcoat anything because I just don't think this kind of stuff is talked about enough, right?
Agreed.
We hear all of the things about the gaslighting and the smear campaigns, and we get a lot of things thrown around, but nobody really talks about the down and dirty, and it's just a disservice. So thank you so much for your time. As always, for those of you listening, again, it is Kim Weeks. She is I am Kim Weeks.
I am Kimberly Weeks.
I am Kimberly
on
Weeks
Instagram.
On Instagram. And she can also be found at Narcissistic Abuse Coach on Instagram. And all of the links, all of the information about Kim and her program, which is called Stay Firm, which we've talked about in the other episodes, will all be in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode. You are not going to want to miss it. Take care.